Hello and welcome. If you've not met me before, I'm Kate and I love looking into the history of the Bronte family and their lives here on my YouTube channel. So today, as I try and make some simple paper stars from old porridge packet, I want to take you back into the childhood world of the Bronte siblings. To me, Christmas is a time filled with imagination, memories, and the quiet magic of making something out of almost nothing. Although we know very little about how the Brontes marked Christmas itself, we do know how wonderfully resourceful and inventive those children were. Just as I'm going to be using these scrap pieces of paper, the young Brontes used whatever they could find, tiny offcuts and bits of old packaging, to create their miniature books and of course those little magazines. They stitched them by hand and they filled them with stories of battles, cities and kingdoms, and they built entire worlds from the smallest of fragments. So as we turn this porridge paper into my wonderful Christmas decorative stars, we're also stepping into the world of 4 children growing up in a very quiet Yorkshire village, still grieving the loss of their mother and their 2 older sisters, living in, of course, the expectations of a clergyman's household, and discovering that imagination could take them far beyond the parsonage walls. Their games, their lessons, songs and stories became the foundation of the novels we cherish today. So in this video, we're going to explore what life was really like for the Bronte children, what children of that era played with, what was read, what the Brontes learned and loved, and how those early years shaped the writers they would later become. And while the world outside their door was often harsh and limited, their creativity carried them far off to lands and epic adventures. So stay with me today because their childhood is far more unusual, vivid and moving than most people realise. And it tells us so much about the strength and the imagination that runs right through every Bronte story. Life at Haworth Parsonage in the 1820s was shaped by duty, learning and quiet order, because the Bronte children were the son and daughters of a clergyman. In a Yorkshire village where the curate held this important social position, his household was expected to be respectable and well-mannered and calmly run. Visitors to the parsonage would have seen 4 small children who were polite, reserved and quick to keep out of the way, exactly as middle-class children of that time were expected to behave. Their early years, however, were pierced by loss. Of course, their mother Maria died in 1821 when the children were very young. Charlotte was 5, Branwell was 4, Emily was 3 and Anne was just 1. 4 years later, in 1825, the family suffered a second loss when the 2 eldest girls, Maria and Elizabeth, died after their harsh and unhealthy time at Cowanbridge School. Maria was 11 and Elizabeth was just 10. Luckily, Charlotte and Emily survived their schooling there, but the memories stayed with them for so many years, and I would probably say the rest of their lives. After all those painful years, Patrick Bronte and good old Aunt Branwell worked together to rebuild this gentle and steady home for the 4 remaining children. Aunt Branwell had journeyed all the way from Penzance in Cornwall to help care for the family, and she offered sort of love and support that the motherless children probably really needed at that time. Alongside her was good old Tabby, the much loved family servant, and of course later came Martha Brown, who also became a family presence. With the small circle of adults around them, the parsonage became a place of structure, care and quiet creativity, and importantly a sense of safety from an outside world that had already taken so much from them. Education became central to their days. Patrick believed deeply that learning opened doors, especially for girls who might one day need respectable work if they did not marry. I mean, do you think he knew that his strong-minded girls were going to struggle to find husbands? I don't know. His decision to teach his daughters himself at a time when many fathers would not have even considered it shows that although he may not have been hands-on and involved in that day-to-day care, he always had their best interest at heart. Lessons were held regularly and taken seriously. They studied geography, history, grammar, and of course the classics, often from books that were old or second-hand or just well thumbed, because money was tight on a clergyman's wage and new volumes were just expensive. Their shelves held the standard text of the day, as well as treasures such as Pilgrim's Progress and Paradise Lost and Isaac Watts. Their books challenged the children's minds and filled their imagination with journeys and struggles and moral puzzles and faraway places that they could only ever dream of. Patrick's classic text from Cambridge and the surviving books their mother had brought from Penzance added even more richness to their small library. Reading was not simply a pastime for the children, it was a doorway through which they reached the wider world. Daily life after 1825 took on a steady rhythm that helped the children heal. There was good food, quiet study, household routine led by good old Aunt Branwell and Tabby, and long walks across the beautiful moors just outside their door where their mind and their spirit could roam freely. The moorland became their playground, the place where they'd breathe in that fresh, beautiful air and recover from that awful time at Cowan Bridge. All of this, from the gentle routine to the books that they read and the conversations they overheard, I believe became the building blocks for everything that was about to come. Their imaginations were beginning to sort of strengthen, their curiosity was growing, and the foundations of their remarkable creative world were slowly beginning to be laid within the walls of that very quiet parsonage. So some of you might be eagle-eyed and see that things are looking a bit different in my room, and you would be right, because I've been having a bit of a sort out in my room. Also, the dog's in here with me, so if you hear tippy-tappy feet, that's him. I had a bit of a sort out the other day, and I've been moving my room around because what was happening, I was in a small corner of my room for editing, and I had no space at all, which was mad. So I decided to move my dresser and a few things around, and now I'm in this lovely corner and I've rehung some pictures. I've got some more bits and bobs out and it's just really cozy. But you might also notice the quality of the actual images are better. And that's because I finally did it. I finally gave in and bought a proper camera, because I've been using my iPhone since I started my channel, which, gosh, it was over a year and a half ago now. And I've always said it's not about the equipment, it's about the content. And that's true to a point. But it got to a point where my phone kept failing. I kept losing imagery, I kept having interference, cutting out, crashing for no reason. And it just could not handle the amount of use it was getting for recording videos. So I had to bite the bullet and I decided to get a proper camera, the proper microphone. So hopefully the sound should be better and also the image should be clearer and brighter. I have looked on the computer and I have found that it is extremely clear, and I'm now very self-conscious about my skin. So no, it doesn't matter. I don't care. It's not about that at all. Ooh, dog just knocked the camera. And I still believe it's about the content. It's not about the camera. It just seems silly to push my phone to its limits. And of course, when you're doing all this work and you're having all these lovely ideas and you're filming them and then you get to the computer and you find they're gone, it's really heartbreaking. So yeah, it was time to do something about it. So you now have Bronte Sisters UK in Technicolor. Right, quick slug of tea. Notice the mug, lovely mug. Right, For most children in the early 19th century, toys were simple and few. You might have a skipping rope or a hoop or a handful of marbles, a wooden doll, or maybe even something like dominoes, but nothing extravagant and nothing wasteful. Paper was precious and not to be squandered, so anything creative tended to be small, neat and carefully made. For the Bronte children though, the heart of their play was their imagination. Even before they wrote those tiny little books, Branwell, Charlotte, Emily and Anne spent hours creating stories together. We know that Charlotte and Emily in particular invented bed plays, which was stories told in bed at night, probably whispered to one another in the dark, shaping characters and adventures, long before the words ever reached the paper. Their plays were fuelled not by expensive toys, but by shared storytelling, by listening and adding and building a world together. But everything changed in 1826 when Patrick Bronte brought home a simple gift for his son, a set of 12 wooden soldiers. It was the sort of thing many boys of the time might have already had, but in the Bronte household it became something extraordinary. Each child chose a soldier to name, and suddenly these tiny figures were no longer toys. They were personalities and leaders and rivals, heroes and schemers. They needed lands to rule and battles to fight and cities to build and histories to inhabit. So from that moment, the children's shared world expanded rapidly. What began as plays with wooden soldiers became the foundation of their imaginary kingdom, and over time the stories developed into elaborate sagas full of politics, romance, betrayal and of course battles. These tales moved from spoken story to the written word and eventually into those small handmade little magazines that we've seen and of course have still survived today. Because paper was expensive, they used whatever they could find. And we know one of their early tiny magazines was made from the wrappings of Epsom salt, blue paper reused and transformed into something entirely new. It is such a perfect reminder that the old ways are sometimes the best ways, that creativity begins with what we already have, which is exactly why I'm using this paper bag from my ordinary porridge packet today. When the Bronte children wanted to create, they simply picked up whatever scraps may lay in the log basket and they would make something magical. Their home life encouraged this. They sang hymns, they listened to their father reading aloud, they created poems and dialogue and entertained each other with stories that grew bigger and bigger each year. They did not need expensive Christmas gifts or fashionable toys. Their imagination gave them everything they needed. And in that same spirit, as we make our Christmas decorations out of scrap paper today, we're kind of stepping into the tradition of the Bronte children that they knew so well, making something beautiful out of almost nothing, letting creativity lead the way. And I think I might have finished another piece of my star. I just need to fold that bit over and pop some glue on it. If you want to imagine what childhood looked like beyond the parsonage walls, it helps to look at the toys and the games children across Britain enjoyed in the early 19th century. Whether a child lived in a grand house or a small cottage, most play was simple, physical and imaginative. Upper and middle class children sometimes had bought toys, wooden dolls with painted faces, toy tea sets, tin soldiers, rocking horses, puzzles, board games such as drafts. There we go. A well-made doll could last through several siblings, carefully painted as the years passed. Books of fairy tales and moral stories also appeared in wealthier homes, often beautifully illustrated. Working class children relied mostly on homemade toys. Maybe a bit of rag became a doll, or a carved stick became a sword, and a hoop cut from an old barrel became a treasured possession. Pebbles, strings, scraps of fabric, old buttons, it was all turned into games. And very young children might have had nothing more than, say, a wooden rattle or a cloth bundle sort of stuffed together for comfort. But they still found imaginative ways to play. Some games have crossed every class. Think of skipping. I mean, it was hugely popular, especially for girls. Children played in groups, chanting rhymes that were passed across generations. Many of the skipping songs that we know today have roots going back so much further. I mean, you had counting games, alphabet games, silly verses that kept that rhythm of the rope slapping against the ground. It was a game that needed nothing more than energy, companionship, and a good length of rope. Card games were also common. Wealthier families might have played whist or loo or quadrille, often as part of adults socialising with the children, watching and learning. Simpler games like Beggar My Neighbour, Old Maid were played by all ages, where cards obviously were available. But for children who had no cards, they made their own from scrap pieces of paper or memorised the rules and played sort of pretend versions of them. Storytelling, of course, was the heart of childhood everywhere. Before the great Victorian wave of children's literature, young listeners were raised on Bible stories, folk tales, and of course local legends. Many children knew stories such as David and Goliath or Daniel in the lion's den, and of course the Nativity. I mean, then they knew them off by heart, hearing them at home or in church or from older relatives. Folk stories varied from place to place, and Yorkshire children might have heard tales of boggarts and giants, travellers on the moors, or old village characters whose names still linger in the local memories. These stories were moral, exciting, frightening, or comforting, and they helped shape the way that children understood the world. Whether bought or handmade, whether played in a nursery or in a cobbled yard, toys were rarely extravagant. They didn't need to be. I mean, the real heart of childhood lay in company, in their imaginations, and a small moment of freedom. I mean, the skipping rhymes on the street, for instance, or a card game by firelight, or a story whispered before bed. These were the things that filled a child's world in the early 19th century. Why does the dog always want to go out? Why could he just not sit there and be happy like he has done for hours? And now, as soon as I start filming, let's go outside. Excuse me while I chuck him out. Out you go, Poochie. Good boy. Right. Back again. But I can't remember what I was talking about now, because now I'm thinking about the dog. Oh, I'm sure my brain is just filled with butterflies just fluttering around. As I try to create these Christmas stars, it's impossible not to think of the Bronte children doing something very similar. Their own handmade books were created from scraps, say the back of an old envelope or a piece of torn letter or discarded packaging. Nothing was wasted, and the writing inside was so tiny and so minuscule that the adults in the house could not read them at all. It made these miniature volumes feel wonderfully secret, like a private kingdom that belonged entirely to the children. The Brontes were surrounded by books, but not in abundance. I mean, money was tight, so second-hand books were treasured and they were repaired and obviously shared between all four siblings. Patrick Bronte made good use of the circulating library in Keighley and often walked several miles there and back to borrow new volumes, not just for his own pleasure, but for the whole family to read. I mean, these books range from history and geography to travellers' tales and classic stories, all of which fed directly into the children's imagination. There's also the books already in the Parsonage. Some were Patrick's own well-worn volumes, and others were moral tales meant to teach obedience and virtue. And of course, there was the Bible. The Bronte children knew their Bible thoroughly, I mean, it shaped not only their lessons, but the way that they understood stories and conflict, justice and morality. Biblical images and rhymes and references appeared again and again in their imaginary worlds. And with this mixture of, say, Tabby's stories and events in the news that they would read in their father's newspaper and, say, borrowed books, it's no wonder that Charlotte, Branwell, Emily and Anne began making their own tiny volumes. I mean, their miniature books were only a few inches high. It's small enough to, say, fit into a doll's hand. And they filled them with plays and poems and debates and dialogue and magazine-style pieces. I mean, at first, the stories were light-hearted adventures based on their toy soldiers, but soon they developed into the rich, sprawling world of Glasstown, Angria and, of course, later Gondor. And beyond those mini books, they wrote out full stories and they drew their maps and they created landscapes and sketched characters. I mean, they were building the physical and the imaginative framework of these worlds. Inside these little books and stories, you find echoes of everything that they were reading. Explorers crossing deserts, classical heroes, political leaders, queens, battles, storms, high drama, quiet reflection, and even the occasional moral struggle. Every book, every lesson, every walk on the moor found its way into the children's writing. These miniature books and writing were more than playthings. They were a training ground, you could say. Early experiments with voices and characters, setting and dialogue. Each tiny page was a step towards the writers that they would later become. Charlotte's narrative confidence, Emily's fierce landscape, Anne's clear-eyed moral vision, all have their beginnings here in the cramped handwriting of these small, fragile little scrapped paper books. Oh, it's crazy, isn't it, to think that's where it all started. And we have another one. We know the Bronte children had moments of real drama and fascination woven into the steady rhythm of their early years. One of the earliest was the Great Bog Burst, be careful how I say that, in 1824, when heavy rain caused the moorland above Haworth to break and sort of rush down towards the village. Charlotte was 8, Branwell was 7, Emily was 6 and Anne was 4. But even if they were too young to remember every detail, the story would have been told and retold in the parsonage for years afterwards. It became part of the shared memory of Haworth and very likely fed their sense of landscape, weather and danger. A few years later came another extraordinary sight. The balloon ascent of 1827, when a hot air balloon rose from Keighley and drifted across the sky towards Colne. I mean, from the high ground behind the parsonage, the children would have almost certainly have seen it just float by, a bright speck gliding over the moors. It appears repeatedly in their early writing, which tells us just how strongly it captured their imagination. I mean, alongside these striking moments, there were obviously quieter experiences that shaped them just as deeply. The children, when slightly older, sometimes went to local concerts and lectures, often with their father. And of course, visiting clergymen called it the parsonage, with stories and conversations from the wider world. These small glimpses beyond Haworth gave children new ideas, images and words to play with. And then there was good old Tabby Ackroyd, their servant. I mean, she knew every inch of the village and everyone who lived in it. Her stories, old sayings and local gossip, and of course her memories, would have been shared freely with the children and probably gladly absorbed. We see echoes of these everyday tales later in their writing, transformed into vivid scenes, grounded characters and wonderful real detail. Church life played its part as well, though in a slightly different way. The Haworth Sunday School was established in 1832, so the Bronte children were older when it became part of village life. Even so, they would have been aware of its beginnings and would have taken part in its teachings as they grew. Bible passages, hymns and moral lessons were already familiar to them from home, but Sunday school added sort of a wider community around those ideas, reinforcing the values and stories that shaped their early understanding of the world. Most days, though, were simple and peaceful. Morning lessons at the table, an afternoon walk on the moors, and reading aloud in the evening. Patrick, he might have shared some news from a borrowed book or from a newspaper when he had some spare time. And I imagine, and I'd like to think this, that the children would be all sat round close listening to every word he had to share. Another one. When we imagine Christmas today, we often picture the world Dickens helped create, with decorative trees, cards on the mantelpiece, the streets full of festive bustle. But none of that existed during the Brontes' early years in 1820. Their Yorkshire Christmases would have been much quieter and, of course, far simpler. Christmas trees didn't become popular in Britain until late 1840, when good old Queen Victoria and Prince Albert helped popularise this very German tradition. And Christmas cards only appeared in the early 1840s and didn't really become widespread for several years to come. So the Brontes grew up without the decorations and customs that we obviously now take for granted. For most Yorkshire families, Christmas was plain, home-centred occasion. It was not a long holiday like we're used to now. Work continued almost as usual, and children rarely had more than a day or two away from lessons. Presents, if given at all, were small, perhaps, say, gloves or a ribbon or sweet treats or a simple handmade toy. Christmas was not about gifts, it was about family, rest and warmth. The food too depended on what the family could afford. I mean, a roast dinner was traditional but not guaranteed. Many households relied on bread, cheese, preserved meat and a good pudding. Spices, fruit and nuts were luxuries, and they were saved for special days. The weather was not always snowy and storybook perfect as we imagine. Haworth's winters could be bitter, windy and wet, and with days of mist rolling across the moors. Snow did fall, but not predictably. A true festive scene would have been rare, and what shaped Christmases most strongly for the Bronte children was church life. As the village's clergyman, Patrick Bronte, didn't have the holidays off, Christmas meant extra responsibilities, and there were additional church services and the usual duties of the season. And of course, visits to parishioners who were, say, ill or grieving or in need of comfort. The children would attended their father's services, listening to the readings and the hymns and the Christmas story told directly from scripture. For them, Christmases was a time of worship, reflection and quiet family moments rather than festivities. The house would have been lit with candles, warm from the kitchen fire and filled with familiar voices. Aunt Branwell, Tabby, Martha and the children gathered indoors against the winter cold. Perhaps there were small treats at the table, a story read out loud or an extra moment of stillness in that long December evening. It was a plainer Christmas than ours, but no less meaningful. I mean, it's easy to picture the parsonage in winter, isn't it? I always do this. I think of it being warm and lit by candles, the wind moving across the moors outside. And the four Bronte children gathered around the fire with their stories and their handmade books and that quiet companionship of winter evenings in Haworth Parsonage. Oh, it makes me all snuggly. As I try and finish these little paper stars, I'm reminded how many childhood memories come from small homemade things. I mean, I have memories of Christmas decorations I made at school, would bring home, and then my poor mother would bring them out year after year to hang on the tree. The Bronte children understood that better than most. Scraps of paper, old envelopes, a discarded label, all of it became the starting point for the world that they built together. Their plays shaped their creativity and strengthened the closeness between them, a closeness that carried them right through to adulthood. We know very little about how the Brontes celebrated Christmas, but we do know the rhythm of their childhood, and it gives us a sense of what the season might have meant to them. The Bible was read every day in the parsonage, so the Christmas story would have been familiar and told with real reverence. The shepherds, the stars, the long journey to Bethlehem. These were images the children knew by heart. It's not hard to imagine Patrick reading aloud from Luke or Matthew on Christmas Eve, the children listening quietly, the candlelight catching the frost on the windows. I think I'm getting a bit carried away with this now, but... And just as I have folded these simple papers into stars, perhaps they made their own tiny stars of Bethlehem from whatever scraps that they had to hand. The Brontes were children who turned very little into something meaningful, something full of imagination. A small folded star would have appealed to them, I think, as a gentle symbol of the season and the reminders of the stories that they knew so well. Christmas often turns our thoughts back to childhood, to imagination, to a quieter joy of making something by hand. And for the Brontes, creativity was not a grand performance. It was simple. It was part of daily life. Stories whispered, books shared, paper folded and stitched into mini volumes. Their world speaks clearly, even across 2 centuries. It was a world shaped by reading, storytelling, faith, and the ability to transform the simplest of things into something magical. Yay. Right, I'm not going to try and put glue on whilst talking because that involves, I can't get the lid off. Oh, that involves too much concentration. And we all know that sometimes I don't do very well. See, I can't even talk whilst getting the glue sorted. So we put a bit on there and fold that one down. I will show you how to do this, by the way. A bit on there and fold that down. Give it a good squeeze. Oh, I'm covered in glue already. It wasn't going to take long, was it? And there we have a pointy bit of a star. Just another 1,000 to do. But it's good. It's nice to have something to fiddle with other than pens and waving my arms. But yeah, there we go. Right, where did I put the lid? Oh, there it is. Let's carry on. Ready? Ta-da! So I think I've made enough now to make a star. I need 5. I think I might have done more than 5. This one's just glued, so it's a bit sticky still, so I might not use this one. But let's see how many I've got. I'm chucking them up here. Whoops! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I've done the right amount. I would have done 6 if I'd have done that one, but it's still a bit sticky, so I'll leave that one to dry. So I will put up a quick video on how I make them from scratch. Just a quick one. So if you want to make your own paper star, it doesn't have to be porridge paper. It could be old wrapping paper. It could be work stuff that you really want to cut up. Could be anything, couldn't it? I tried making it this one. This was a form from the post office that I needed to fill in, but then I didn't need it in the end. And I did it with sellotape just to see if I had the right idea, because I needed a quick way of seeing if it worked. But it's obviously red and white paper and it looks quite good, doesn't it? But it is covered in sellotape, so it's close up, it's not great. But hanging from a window, I think that would look quite nice if you can see it. So yeah, that was my trial one. So now I've got these and I will show you how to do them. But basically this top triangle section, you put glue on and you stick the next one on top. And then you put glue on the top triangle section of that one. And then you put another one on top. And so they're all together. And then you kind of, I'll show you. It's easier to show. I'm a visual person. I'm not very good at that. So. with a proper microphone. Just not that big again, I got a bit confused. To the motherless children and everything. With the small circle of children, no, with a small circle of adults. Spent hours. This isn't going to work. That is not a very good square. Look. Look how odd that is. That's like completely out. What happened there when I was cutting that one? Find another piece of paper. To written word and eventually into their handmade Anglia and Gondor. I've got a squeaky bit on my chair and it's annoying me because every time I wave my arms about I can hear it. I'm sorry if you can hear my squeaky chair. Now I'm completely confused. With decorative tea, got tea on the brain, and streets full of festive bubble. Full of festive bubble? As I've been making these little paper stars, it's kind of reminded me how much space simple handmade things gives you to think. There's kind of like a rhythm to it, isn't there? A quietness that lets your mind wander. It makes me reflect on how close the Bronte children must have been, sitting together, creating their own tiny worlds. The sisters especially shared everything. I mean, their books, their stories, their ideas, and that sense of being almost an extension of one another. I mean, it seems to run through everything they wrote. There is such tenderness in that closeness. It also makes me think of the kindness of good old Aunt Branwell. I can't say her name any other way. I mean, she left her life in Cornwall to look after her niece and nephew, offering stability and affection at such an important time for them. And of Patrick Bronte, who worked so hard to give his daughters a good education, believing so firmly in their abilities, encouraging them long before the world ever knew their names. All of this speaks to a family held together by loyalty, thoughtfulness, and enormous love. Right, and now here are my 3 questions for the week. Number 1, which of the Brontes children's homemade creations would you most like to see in person if they'd survived, or they might have survived? Oops. Number 2, do you think modern children could enjoy creating their own tiny books in the same way that the Brontes did? Or has technology kind of taken over when it comes to their attention? Put that on there. And question number 3, what small handmade object from your own childhood? Oh, this makes me all squidgy. I forgot what I was going to say now. What small handmade object from your own childhood do you remember the most fondly? And do you still have it? Oh, that makes me all clucky and warm. Thank you so much for watching today. If you like this video, please do that whole likey, subscribey thing because it really does help me out and lets YouTube know that we want to watch more Bronte content. Have a good weekend and take care. And guess what? I'm back next Friday, yay! For another Christmas Bronte adventure. Yippee! I will see you then. Take care. Bye! So you probably want to see if this is going to work. Yeah, me too. Kind of been squishing it together, hoping that the glue will do its thing. It might not be dry enough. We will see. Let's get a bit of glue on that just in case we can. I might put the glue down. All hands needed at this point. Da, 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 da. There we go. Just squeeze it inside. Make sure it's nice and tight. I'm kind of covering myself up with the star, aren't I? And there we have it. A star made whilst chatting to you lot. Look at that. I'm really pleased with that. Bit of barcode. Bit of ingredients. What do you think? Yay, I'm going to hang that from my window. So I managed to make 2 stars from 1 packet of porridge. I could even, I don't know if it will work, put them together to make like a real 3D star, but I don't think that will work. So a pair of stars. And in the summer, you could turn them the other way round and make them into like flowers, and you could put something in the middle, like a pom-pom, and they look like flowers. Yay! Ah, I do feel very festive now.